Hello, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It is currently the evening of January 21st, 2024 in the United States, the morning of January 22nd, 2024 in the Middle East. Before I get started, I will note that in the coming week I'm going to upload the summaries earlier in the day. If you'd like to get notification when they are uploaded, if you are subscribed to the channel, I suggest you turn on notifications on YouTube. That way you'll get a notification every time a new video is uploaded. Starting with the hostage situation, the Wall Street Journal today reported that after substantial combined pressure from the United States, Qatar, and Egypt, Israel and Hamas have agreed to again begin hostage negotiations that are going to take place in Egypt. According to the report, the negotiators, these three countries, are bringing a three-phase plan to the table. According to the report, the first phase will consist of 90 days that will include a truce, Hamas releasing all civilian hostages, Israel releasing hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, and the IDF pulling back its forces from the centers of cities in the Gaza Strip, stopping surveillance and doubling humanitarian aid into Gaza. The second phase, Hamas will release female soldiers that are being held, as well as the bodies of hostages that are being held, and Israel will in turn release more Palestinian prisoners. In the third phase, Hamas will release all the male soldiers and males of fighting age, because Hamas considers anyone in Israel who may be called up for reserve duty as a soldier, while Israel will redeploy its forces outside the Gaza Strip and release more Palestinian prisoners. According to the report, the plan also reportedly discusses a fund to rebuild the Gaza Strip and security assurances for the Hamas leadership, and is deliberately vague about whether the war will actually be over or what will happen at the end. It's important to note that even in this report it states that neither side agrees to these terms and is quite far from what these terms suggest. The report also includes that the main challenges are the disconnect in the Hamas leadership, with estimates stating that Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas in the Gaza Strip, has not even spoken to Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas in Qatar, but the official leader of Hamas, for over a month. Relating to this, Prime Minister Netanyahu today issued a statement regarding the hostage situation. Among others, he said, and I quote, "I categorically reject the surrender conditions offered by the Hamas monsters. Hamas demands in exchange for our hostages the end of the war, removing our forces from Gaza, releasing all the Nukhba murderers and rapists, and leaving Hamas in charge. Hamas's terms emphasize the simple truth. Only complete victory will guarantee the annihilation of Hamas and return of all our hostages." However, despite this rhetoric, it was reported today in Israel that the head of the Mossad, Dadi Barnea, is going to update the war cabinet about attempts to advance in the deals and the hostage negotiations. While rejecting Hamas's position that only a complete ceasefire will bring back hostages, the Mossad anticipates that it may be possible to bring Hamas down from this tree and negotiate some sort of hostage exchange. The IDF today confirmed that Shai Levinson, who is a 19-year-old who was kidnapped on October 7th, was in fact killed on October 7th, and his body is held by Hamas. That is now another hostage that is confirmed dead. Moving on to the fighting in the Gaza Strip, after almost 2 days of no launches, several rockets were sent from the Gaza Strip targeting the areas surrounding the Gaza Strip in Israel today. These targeted primarily the areas of Kisufim. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and Gaza City, there were substantial gun battles reported in the Darj Tufah area, after which the IDF announced that it took over Hamas military compound. 15 Hamas operatives were reportedly killed in this operation. Other reports suggested that there was a missile strike against a car in the El Yarmouk market of Gaza City, and the 3 Palestinians were killed. No reports were made about what was in this car or who was being targeted. Moving on to the central parts of the Gaza Strip, there's continued fighting in the central camps of El Bureij and El Nusrat refugee camp. The IDF Navy reportedly is participating in bombings as well. The Al-Quds forces, that is the military wing of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, reported today that its sniping units shot and killed 2 IDF soldiers in the El Bureij refugee camp. There's no confirmation of this from any other report. In the El Maghazi refugee camp, there was a series of IDF raids against different terror infrastructures of Hamas that were set up in the camp in and around civilian buildings. The IDF also reportedly stormed the Hamas headquarters in the region, uncovering launching sites that were spread throughout olive groves as well. The IDF reported that dozens of terror infrastructures in El Maghazi refugee camp were destroyed and that over 30 Hamas operatives were killed. Moving on down to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, in Han Yunis, there were reports of intensive bombings throughout the day as the IDF continues its advancement. Large explosions were seen in the Bant el Samin areas of Han Yunis, and intensive gun battles were also reported around Nasser Hospital. Relatedly, the IDF is also continuously expanding its excavation of the tunnel network underneath the city of Han Yunis. The IDF today published more reports about the main tunnel that it discovered, where it found evidence that hostages were being held. According to different reports, the tunnel spans over 830 meters and is 20 meters underground. After releasing these pictures and more evidence, the IDF reportedly is beginning to destroy this tunnel network. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant stated today relating to ongoing operations, and I quote, "The operation in Khan Yunis will soon be expanded to other places. Mushroom clouds of tanks, artillery, and warplanes will continue to cover the skies of Gaza until we reach our goals, overthrowing Hamas and returning all of our hostages home safely." In other news, amidst the reports from several days ago that Israel is soon going to decide how it is going to operate in Rafah, which is the most southern city in the Gaza Strip, currently housing most of the population of the Gaza Strip as internally displaced people, and the city is divided between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, with the Philadelphia line being the border between them. There was a report in Al Arabi al-Jadid today regarding Israeli-Egyptian relations in light of the war. According to the report, quoted the senior Egyptian source, stating that Israel's insistence to operate in the Philadelphia line jeopardizes Israeli-Egyptian relations. It added that Netanyahu is considered a threat to the entire region, and while Netanyahu is willing to violate treaties with Egypt in order to satisfy his political base in Israel, he should realize that the Egyptian regime also has a political base and public pressure and may have to respond. What the report is referencing is the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt that specifically limits whatever military activity can be taken across the border, and Egypt is suggesting that Israeli activities along the Philadelphia line may end up violating this treaty. In addition to this, Wall Street Journal also published another report today regarding the war and its progression. It cited both U.S. intelligence and Israeli sources, stating that Israel has thus far eliminated only 20 to 30% of Hamas's fighting force, estimated 9,000 Hamas operatives were killed out of, again, an estimate of 30,000, and that assessments are that Hamas has enough ammunition and resources to continue fighting for months. The report notes that Hamas has perfected its strategy since the war began and is engaging in ambushes and guerrilla fighting rather than face-to-face confrontations, and is already starting to rebuild some of its forces in the northern parts of the Gaza Strip as the IDF pulls out. The report also cites that between 10,500 and 16,000 Hamas fighters are estimated to have been injured in the fighting, noting that many of these could also return to the fighting as they heal. Responding to these reports and to reports from several days ago that the war is progressing slower than expected and that Hamas is starting to rebuild in the north, Prime Minister Netanyahu today refuted all these allegations. He stated that the war is proceeding on schedule and that it was clear that Hamas will move to more guerrilla-style fighting, and the IDF has planned for this. In addition to that, there was a report today that 130 IDF officers, including some senior officers, who either participated or are actively participating in the fighting in Gaza, wrote a letter to the Israeli cabinet and the chief of staff, criticizing the lack of translating IDF successes in the north of the Gaza Strip specifically into a long-term strategy. The main message was to stop the IDF withdrawal from the northern parts of the Gaza Strip and not allow Palestinian civilians to return home until all the hostages are returned, specifically noting that without any strategy, all the IDF successes are going to be lost. Regarding casualties, one IDF soldier is reported killed in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of IDF soldiers that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began to 195. 10 more IDF soldiers are reported injured in the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian Health Ministry is reporting that 178 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, bringing the total number of Palestinians that were killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 25,105. 62,681 Palestinians are reported injured, and there are still several thousand that are buried under the rubble and presumed dead. Moving on to the humanitarian situation, the report came out today that on January 19th, roughly 100 Palestinians that had been arrested in the Gaza Strip and taken back to Israel had been returned to the Gaza Strip through the Kerem Shalom crossing. According to reports, they were taken back to Israel for interrogations, and after it was confirmed that they were not operatives of Hamas, they were returned. Regarding the entrance of aid trucks, the IDF announced today that 260 aid trucks carrying food, water, medical supplies, and shelter entered the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours, emphasizing that this was the largest number of trucks to enter the Gaza Strip in one day since the war began. The IDF's report added, quote, "There is no limit to the amount of humanitarian aid that can enter the Gaza Strip. This relates to ongoing messages that the IDF has been putting out specifically since the hearings in the ICJ, the National Court of Justice, in which the IDF is repeatedly saying it is happy, quote-unquote, to allow as much humanitarian aid to enter the Gaza Strip as possible, but the problems are on the Palestinian side and the UN side that cannot handle the volume of the entry of humanitarian aid trucks." Moving on to the West Bank, substantial IDF activity was reported today in several different areas of the West Bank. These were reported in Sebastia, that is near Nablus, in Shueche, that is near Tulkarem, and in the Chizmeh village. Substantial weapons were confiscated in these different places, and there was also reported activity in Hebron, where a couple Palestinian homes were destroyed. One Palestinian was reported injured in these different operations, and 7 Palestinians were reportedly arrested throughout the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Other political news related to the West Bank. The Israeli cabinet today, after a heated debate that reportedly involved a lot of yelling, approved the transfer of Palestinian Authority money through Norway that will then be transferred to the Palestinian Authority. The money is going to be transferred in full, but only the portion that is destined for the West Bank will be transferred to the Palestinian Authority. The United States reportedly is a guarantee that the money that was destined for the Gaza Strip will not be transferred. So just some background about this. Since October 7th, the tax money that Israel collects for the Palestinian Authority and transfers to it every month has been frozen. It's been frozen because Israel said it would not transfer any monies to the Palestinian Authority that will then fund anyone in the Gaza Strip. After monumental U.S. pressure, Israel agreed to transfer the money to the Palestinian Authority, but deducting the portion that would go to the Gaza Strip. Palestinian Authority, in turn, refused to accept the money, saying they want the money in full and they don't accept any Israeli deductions. Since then, the Palestinian Authority has not received the money, and this sum of money is critically important. It's important to understand that this involves roughly 750 to 800 million new Israeli shekels that are transferred to the Palestinian Authority each month, and this constitutes roughly 65% of the Palestinian Authority's budget. Without this money, the Palestinian Authority is on the brink of bankruptcy, and it doesn't have the money to pay salaries of different security officials that are maintaining security in the West Bank. Right now, after this monumental U.S. pressure, it was also brought up in cabinet when Prime Minister Netanyahu was asked, why do we have to do this? This doesn't make sense. He said because the U.S. demands it. Right now, Israel has approved this. It remains to be seen if the Palestinian Authority, under the auspices of the PLO, will accept this. The PLO's General Secretary, Hussein Ashek, tweeted in response to this, any deviation from our financial rights or conditions Israel imposes stopping the Palestinian Authority from paying our people in the Gaza Strip is hereby categorically rejected. It remains to be seen if the Palestinian Authority will in fact reject the money from Norway, or if it will accept the money deducted with the sum that is destined for the Gaza Strip deducted. We'll find out more in the coming days. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel, southern parts of Lebanon. There were continuous rockets and missiles that were sent from Lebanon targeting different areas in northern Israel today. There was a direct hit of a missile that targeted the area of a house in Avivim in the Upper Galilee. There were also rockets sent towards Biranit in the Western Galilee and Shomra. Regarding IDF retaliations, the IDF reported that it carried out several rounds of attacks in the Mahba village in southern Lebanon, attacking Hezbollah infrastructure, military structures, lookout posts, and launching sites. Al-Manar, which is a Hezbollah affiliate, reported 5 different attacks occurred in Marhaba, and there were also other attacks carried out in the Kila village. The Lebanese National News Agency reported that 5 houses were destroyed in the Marhaba area with no casualties. Other IDF attacks targeted also operational command centers and other military structures. Al-Akhbar reported that the IDF had carried out attacks in Yarun, Marun Aras, Itaron, El Jabin, and Sikhin as well. Other news, there was an assassination attempt reported in Lebanon today. A drone reportedly targeted a car in the town of Kafra, with a target reportedly being Fadi Suleiman, who's Hezbollah's commander of the central region of southern Lebanon and a well-known field commander. He reportedly survived. One of his companions, or reportedly his bodyguard, was killed. With the death of that bodyguard, Hezbollah announced 164 operatives of Hezbollah have been killed since the war began. According to Israeli officials, that number is much higher. Moving on to the Syrian region, there was a report today that Russia expressed anger over the intensifying Israeli activity in Syria in the last several days, but more importantly, that after expressing that anger, Russia has begun activating more helicopter and air patrol units along the border between Israel and Syria, and may have also sent some ground forces to man different outposts along the Syrian side of the Golan Heights. Moving on to some of the regional developments, there was reported in Sky News in Arabic that the coalition's attacks in Yemen since last week have so far killed over 75 people, and according to the report, these include 3 experts from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, 6 Hezbollah members, and 2 operatives from different Iraqi militias. This tells us more about this regional cooperation, and joins with other reports from several days ago that Hezbollah has personally sent several different operatives to the area to help coordinate the Houthi attacks and coordinate their weapon smuggling from Iran. Other news, the Islamic resistance in Iraq claimed responsibility for a drone attack against Israel, specifically noting that they attacked the Golan Heights on Saturday. There were no reports made about any attack in the Golan Heights anywhere else, so unclear what this report actually relates to. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours, there were increased protests for hostage release in Israel being seen throughout the day. Some set up a tent city and barricaded themselves outside the Prime Minister's residence in Jerusalem. Signs reportedly stated, "We love our children more than we hate Hamas." Other news, French foreign minister is due to arrive in Israel tonight after he had several visits in the last several weeks in both Egypt and Lebanon. France is very involved in trying to avoid escalations between Israel and Lebanon, and reportedly that is going to be one of the main missions that the French foreign minister has when he's in Israel. Other news, Hamas published an 18-page document today explaining the group's motivation for October 7th. According to the document, which is titled Our Narrative, the group states that it is fighting Israel as part of its 105-year war against colonialism that includes both British colonialism and Zionist colonialism. It also said that the aims of October 7th specifically were to stop the expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, stop Israeli plans to continue to control and Jewify the Al-Aqsa Mosque, as well as breaking the siege on Gaza. The document also denies that there was any deliberate targeting of women and children or sexual violence on October 7th, arguing that the main aim of the attack was to target IDF bases. It does note that it is possible that in the heat of battle, several different mistakes were made. The report also reiterates what was stated in Hamas's 2017 policy platform, that its conflict is with Israel and not with Jews, specifically noting that it hopes to keep the conflict within the confines of what it considers historic Palestine. Importantly, commentators in Gaza were questioning why Hamas is publishing this now, and different Palestinian commentators suggested that Hamas is trying to justify the price that Gazans are paying as a result of the war, trying to bolster its position in the Arab world, and that is the reason it published this document today, trying to actually state what its aims are and putting a much more human face on the October 7th attack in order to justify why that attack was carried out and why now Israel's aggression has to be stopped. Moving on to the future of the Gaza Strip, Israeli member of Knesset Tzvi Sukkot of Religious Zionism today put out a statement. Despite the fact that all these statements are being used against Israel in the International Court of Justice, he again stated, quote, Israel should occupy northern Gaza, annex it and establish Israeli settlements, adding there will be no Palestinian state. Netanyahu can tell the Americans anything he wants. That is his business. Similarly, Economy Minister Nir Barkat issued a direct threat to Netanyahu, stating, quote, whoever is thinking of giving the Palestinians a reward of a state after October 7th will find that he has no government. Related to Netanyahu's statements, UK Foreign Minister today expressed disappointment in Netanyahu's rejection of a Palestinian state. His statements were also condemned by the UN Secretary General. Financial Times today reported that EU foreign ministers are going to meet tomorrow to discuss Netanyahu's refusal position and the fact that he is saying there will be no Palestinian state, or that Israel will have complete security control over all the territory west of the Jordan River. According to the report, they are going to discuss both positive and negative incentives that the EU can level towards Israel. However, the report adds that it is very likely that as long as Netanyahu is prime minister, this will be Israel's official position. But it also states, much like the report in NBC, that the EU foreign ministers are also starting to look to the fact that Netanyahu's days in Israeli politics may be numbered, and thus the EU is going to try to build its position also for the day after Netanyahu in Israeli politics. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.